I love the hustle, man.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is William from Before the Billions on the Black Mac in Tech channel. Thank you guys so much for rocking with me and tuning in to another great discussion. I have a special guest with me today. We have Mark Lawson. Now, this guy, he has a lot of different roles, and we're going to be going through it. And I just want to go ahead and give him the greatest applause and the shout outs that I can because he is a hardworking black man in tech. So let's go ahead and say hello to Mark Lawson.
Oh,
Hey, Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Doing well. So, Mark, I gave you the introduction, so I want you to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can go into what you actually do.
Okay. My name is Mark Lawson. I am a native of Atlanta. I've been here my entire life. Uh, and outside of technology, the thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that I'm Atlanta through and through. So, Georgia Tech graduate, Georgia State graduate, um, everything ATL. Even an Atlanta Hawks fan, Falcons fan, Atlanta through and through. In terms of what I've done or what I do, I am the director of technology for Technologists of Color. We're a growth platform for African Americans in technology who are trying to either enter the tech field or to grow within that field. So we put on and we curate events in order for them to be able to network and organize around technology. We do workforce development. We also do programs oriented towards children. So it's all things technology. I also operate as a technology consultant. So my background is in software development and IT services, as well as the fact that I, again, as a consultant, work with other organizations. One of them is called Black Men Lab. And what that does is it curates programs. It's targeted from the ages of 14 to 24-year-old Black men to try and put them on the straight and narrow and access to all types of things to have a good experience as a Black man in the world. But it's open, we like to say, from 8 to 85 in terms of attendance. And it operates out of the Andrew and Walter Young YMCA here in Atlanta, as well as the Epster Recreation Center in Decatur. So those are some of the different things I do. And in addition to being with the organization Black Men Lab, I also operate as the technology consultant for them, so social media and other things like that.
All right, great. So I love that you highlight that you are born and raised in Atlanta. Me too. You know, I went to Georgia
Mhm.
State as well, so I was a Panther. And I love the fact that you highlight technologists of color. I've been going to you guys for close to 3 years now, actually. And then also Black Man Lab. Is that the correct name? Black Man
That's
Lab.
correct. Correct.
Perfect.
Yes.
And I love the fact that you pretty much you give back to the community and help other men and help them to be able to become a better person, to become a better and greater in our community. So it's absolutely wonderful, man. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you actually started your career?
Okay. So I started off very much interested in technology in terms of watching things on television, like with robots and things like that as a kid. I programmed fairly young. I had a Texas Instruments. I want to say it was the TI-85, I believe, but it was essentially a computer that you use cartridges in that you could program. And the native programming to it was BASIC. So as a little kid, I used to write programs in it on BASIC that, and what writing programs meant at that point is that you would get a book and it would have programs in it. So if you wanted to play a game, you would have to actually code the game first and then play it. So I think that was around 10 years old. Um, and I continued doing that. I had a Mac. My dad worked for AT&T, but at the time it was Lucent Technologies, Bell South Labs. So he would bring home computers. So we had Macs, we had PCs. So I programmed like Turbo Pascal like in high school. The thing I like to say is, but at the time, computers didn't do anything cool, or at least from my point of view. So I was very much more into engineering related stuff. So I originally went to Georgia Tech to be an aerospace engineer, um, and then I switched over to mechanical, and that was about the time that the internet, was this really cool thing. I'd made web pages and things like that in college, but again, it really didn't do much. So I went into engineering for a while, and then the internet was having much more interesting things going on. So I decided to go back to grad school where I majored in computer information systems. So I decided that instead of just being in computer science, which was at the time at Tech and Georgia State very theoretical based, I guess you would say, computer information systems was a combination of business and computer science so that we were solving realistic problems. And so it wasn't as abstract. So that was kind of my foray into that. And then I graduated and immediately worked at a company where I was a consultant. It was a very small company. I think at the time that I arrived, there were maybe five engineers there. And so I was hired to be a software engineer, but it entailed doing some of everything. So I didn't just write programs. I set up servers. I managed servers. At the time, we didn't have the concept of a full stack engineer, but later on, I guess that's what you would say. As well as I think what we would describe what I did was software as a service. That's what you would call it now. And it had front end, back end, web services. Again, we had to maintain actual physical servers at a data center. So it was very involved. I got the opportunity to work across several different platforms and in several different industries. So I did medical, accounting, banking, manufacturing. And from my point of view, they all had a lot in common. But what I ended up having to learn was the peculiarities of each industry. So I learned a lot about the medical industry and like billing and those type of things. So it was a very exciting uh, point in technology because we were learning a tremendous amount. And I went from being one of the engineers to the manager. And being a small company, I still programmed, I still did a lot of things. I got to interface with customers. Um, I architected the design. So when I originally started, the application was a desktop app and migrated over to a web application, as well as I had to like reverse engineer a database in order to start it up. So I got my hands very much into the meat of different things and was able to design a lot of different systems. So that was kind of my entry into the space. Um, and it really called on a lot of different things. It actually required the fact that I did have a business background, so I became interested in understanding the person's business in order to make sure that the technology that we were providing fit their business. When I became a manager, I not only had to work with the employees, but I also had to work with outside customers, and then I had to negotiate. So we might have a customer and it might be a Fortune 500 company, or we might be talking to a company just as small as us or smaller, right? So knowing how to navigate those interpersonal things in terms of how to deal with this customer to get the information that I need to be useful for them, and then the turnaround might be really quickly for a small company, right? If I give them a requirement, then they have somebody working on it and they get it right back to me. Or it could be a much larger project for a much larger company. And so we have to give them information, but I might not hear back from them for a month. And so to be able to do all of that, as well as the entire time training up junior engineers in order to be able to do that. And because it is a small company, your undergraduate experience doesn't necessarily prepare you for that. So if I got someone with the right skills, then we could add things to you, but you are most likely going to end up doing things that were sometimes outside of your comfort zone because it was a small company. You were going to wear a lot of hats.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, you dropped so many gems, and like you, the highlight, and it also goes into our topic as well as building those networks between you, your business, and then also the third party companies. So can you kind of highlight the importance of building those networks, those relationships, especially when it comes to business?
So, one of the things, again, would be to get a feel for who your customer is, right? So, you're talking to someone, you might be talking to another developer. You could be talking to someone who is a business person. They could be a business analyst, they could be a vice president, they could be the CEO of that company. And then, based on their actual role within the company, you also have to assess how you speak to them. And what I mean by that is that you don't want to speak as a developer to someone who has a business role, right? The things you're saying, we're using C sharp, the information is coming in over TCP, we can't connect to it because you need to open this port. Like all that is gobbledygook, right? You have to express the problem in the way that they understand and in a way that actually addresses situations that they understand or need, as well as again, sometimes you have to be aware of people's quote unquote rank, right? So if this is the vice president, these are the things that are important to this person. They're a stakeholder, they're the person who makes the decisions, they're kind of in charge of this project, but they're not your end user, but they are the person who says yes or no to things. But you kind of have to talk to them in order to get to who might be your end user, right? To get their true feedback about what they like, right? Because if there's something that's wrong with the application, you need to have the person who actually uses it on a day-to-day basis tell you what's going on. But that person isn't necessarily the go no go for whether or not this goes through or this bug becomes a priority. So you have to negotiate those different relationships. And then sometimes with email, like, you might have to CC the right person in order to make sure that the importance of what you're saying comes through because the person you're talking to, as I said, they might have a lot of things on their plate. And so you have to rope in whoever's ultimately responsible to make sure that your email gets responded to in a timely fashion. Because you might not be their priority, although it's of priority to the person whom you're working with. Sometimes in a larger corporation, as opposed to a smaller corporation, like people don't have direct access to things, right? So let's say that I need you to provision a server. There might be this long process on your end. And over here in my shop, I just walk over there, fill out some, things, and then send somebody down to the co-location facility to set up the server and make sure that happens, or we jump on and we remote desktop into the box and make things happen, right? So I can literally be on the telephone with you and then fix it right now. Whereas you need to talk to the people in IT, you need to, somebody needs to be given access. And so you have to negotiate all of that. And sometimes you have to give grace for that process because the world is literally on fire, but the person you're talking to, it's not their fault, right? They can't facilitate what it is you're trying to ask them to do because of their business processes. So it helps to maintain good relationships with people to make sure that you're handling it appropriately and they're not dodging your call, all those types of things, right? That you have to be aware of.
Okay. When you first started, was that a difficult transition to go from being a pretty much a full stack developer into being a manager and actually managing people and then building those relationships? Was that a hard transition?
I would say that the relationship component wasn't that difficult at first. The larger your team gets, the more you have to deal with different personalities, right? And then You also have to keep someone challenged, right? But you also have to get the work done. So you have to be aware of people's skills, but then give them the ability to upskill, to stretch themselves, that type of thing. You have constraints in terms of you have deadlines, you have time, figuring out whose personality works best, who works well together, who you need to go check up on a couple times a day, who you don't really need to worry about. They'll come to you if there's a problem. We were an agile shop, so having those morning stand ups and again, making sure that people surface the problem before it was a big problem, and really knowing the individuals, right? Like, you're good at this, but not necessarily at that. So I'm going to give you those tasks, but I want to stretch you. So I'm going to give you some of that. But also realizing that this person is the kind of person who sometimes can bite off more than they can chew, right? So you need to make sure by checking with them a little bit more often that they're in a good place before they run off the rails, right? And then obviously over time, that's not behavior that you want to see. So figuring out how you change how they do that. Um, as well as there's all other types of things that you have to worry about with regard to managing people. So there's their personality. Some people are morning people. Some people, like, morning is not their time. You need to let them get their coffee. Some people like conversation. Some people don't like conversation. Some people want to get to the point. Some people beat around the bush, right? In terms of like, hey, I came over here to ask you X, and we were talking about everything but X. Um, so it did take some time in order to kind of settle into different personalities. And as people come into and out of being your direct reports, having to learn how they do things. And then also, one of the things, because it was a small company, I grew the technology components as well as the documentation and other things like that. So getting people to do things that developers don't like, but are of vital importance in terms of how we have things set up, which was having a plan, um, documenting your work, testing, like all the not necessarily cool things that you have to repeatedly get people into the groove of doing it if you're a small shop. And what I mean by that is that we worked on projects that lasted over years, right? So if you made the mistake, you might be the one fixing it, right? Or might be the one fixing it. Or you're probably fixing something that I didn't do that well 5 years ago, right? So hopefully I documented it and I learned to do all those things because at a certain point in time, I was the person fixing my own mistakes. So again, that was kind of the thing that you had to negotiate. And then externally, um, teaching people how to work with customers if they are very introverted or they are very developer focused, and say, hey, you can't tell a customer that, right? Like, we have to say this differently. The person you're talking to is the person who messed it up, but you can't say it exactly like that. Otherwise, you're going to have a contentious relationship going forward. Like, don't embarrass them in front of their boss. Um, but, you know, it's not our fault. So let's not absorb the fault either, and figuring out how you negotiate that.
Okay. And have you ever had anything like that actually happen where you had to make sure that whatever information that you were trying to portray to a customer actually made sense to them, and then has that ever happened to you personally?
Oh, all the time, right? Again, so I could be talking to a business owner, right? So I have, but they're experiencing a technical problem
Yeah.
and they're responsible for the technical problem. So I have to make them understand what's going on, let them know it's on their side, right? And talk them through how we determine how we fix this. Like, I need to talk to the people in this department in order for us to determine what is going wrong. But we have checks and balances in our system that are reporting to us like what's happening. And I have an audit log that indicates, this is kind of what's going on. And again, sometimes people are not ready, like they're already pointing fingers, right? And it's going to make it that much better because things are not going well. That is your fault. And so you have to say, well, here's what's happening. Um, the problem seems to be this, and here's how we take care of it. Or here's another funny one that I experienced a lot. So let's say that there's a particular error message, and or a situation that's happening, and let's say it's a medical application, and you're deleting records, or it's a banking app, and like somebody deleted something, right? And um, because of that, the deletion process has been made intentionally difficult, right? So the fact that it was deleted, there were prompts that said, hey, are you sure? So and so. And because of ongoing situations like this, we have audit trails that tell me who's logged in, what happened, etc. So again, I've been on the phone with or brought into the room while we're on the phone with a person describing to us something that happened as we're writing the ticket or as we're going back through the ticket. And so let's say your username was B Billions, right? And I'm going through things and I'm looking at it, and at some point you've mentioned that, but we're just, I'm not going to harp on that, but I know what your user is, right? And we're going in here and we're looking through the records, and you're telling me, hey, all of my information was lost. It was here and it was gone, right? Like it just disappeared. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm looking through the log and I says, well, it says right here at 4:30, Central Time, so and so happened, and it was deleted by, it says here B Billions. And the person goes, I was like, okay, so let's go back and let's look at the screen. And so we would do a walkthrough, and it's like right here, when you click on this button, this dialog comes up, right? And it indicates that the following is going to delete your record. If you would like that to happen, input this and then click OK, right? And if you don't, you just click on things, it never deletes anything. So the phone usually gets quiet. And the person goes, "Oh, okay. I'm not really sure what happened, but all right, we'll look into that, right?" And again, it was not. It was. It happened several times that the person is telling you that their record just flew into the ether, but you have an audit trail that says they deleted it, right? And that usually, again, phone gets quiet. Um, they move some things around. You send them some screenshots, etc. This is pre-Zoom, of course, so it's not like we're sharing a screen. But you let them know, like, I know you did it, but we're not really gonna, press that issue. And then we mark that as resolved. And also we try and make sure that there is enough of a process to, it's not just click, 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 and then your whole thing is deleted. So perhaps we need to change the error message to make it more clear. Like sometimes, it is developer error insofar as we're not, we're not evolving the program for how people actually think, as opposed to what we would, how we would like them to interact with it. So that happens a lot, right? Getting in the psychology of your user and realizing things like don't and stop, if shouldn't be easy to do, right? It should be the hardest path. If it's going to have the most impact. in terms of negatively. Like it should be very hard. And nowadays, like if you go to delete something, right, they like literally ask you to almost put in the entire file name before they'll get rid of it in some instances, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just things like that.
Yeah, man, that sounds that sounds absolutely terrible to get caught. You know, and then you went through all of this on the phone and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think that that's a great way to cover yourself, especially. I know that you were saying that you're a consultant. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do as a consultant as well? And then also, one more thing before we get into that is, uh, you also said that in your story this was medical data, and I know that if you delete records and stuff out of the database, it is going to cause you to have some sort of if the record isn't backed up, you're messing up people's PII data, and that may also then cost you some money as far as the business. So you have to make sure that you have your backups in place and everything before you start deleting things out of a database. Um,
So
yes.
to that specifically, right, it may look deleted on your side, but it's not gone.
It's still in the
Right?
database. Yeah.
Right. It's not gone. It may require um a little bit of again back end interference, right, in order to recover that record. But to your point, because of the importance of that type of information, that's why we have it listed who did what, when they did it, and those type of things in kind of like an audit trail in the database to make sure that we aren't getting rid of vital information and it isn't that difficult to recover it, but it might be difficult for the person, right? Like they might not have the appropriate rights on their side to retrieve it.
Mhm.
And that might be the purpose of the call, or that might be the direction that the call goes in terms of like how we handle this situation. Or sometimes, you know, it's not as hard for them to recover it. So in the case of some of these systems, because of where they were, people were doing in medical scenarios or other scenarios, sometimes there is a paper trail. So they're like transferring information over. Like, so when you go to your doctor, in most instances, they might have a computer in front of you, but they also have a pad, right? So re-entering it may not be a problem. But again, in a lot of instances, we can recover your data if we have to. We just want to make sure that you realize that you're deleting things that you don't mean to. Um, as a consultant, I work in the capacity of helping businesses navigate digital transformations, or in some instances, so a digital transformation would be simply that you have physical processes that you're currently doing, right? You operate your business on pen and paper or some amalgam of a bunch of different systems, and then we're going to come together on creating a system for your specific needs. So it's understanding what those business processes are, looking out on the market, seeing if there's anything that you could use that would allow you to replace what you're doing. Depending upon the size of the shop, sometimes what is most known of is not the appropriate thing for you to use because it has a lot of things in there that you won't use at that price point, right? So there might be something else, and you just might not have heard of it before, that we can put your information in. And then within it, we can go through an implementation where it's configurable. So we make certain configurations to make it more like how your business processes actually are in reality, instead of you having to acquiesce to the system, right? Like sometimes what a system is asking you to do is best practices, but it might be best practices for a shop of 40 people, not for a shop of 10, right? So having all of those checks and balances are only slowing you down because it's not three different people responsible for three different sections of this role. You're doing all of them. So there's no reason for you to do some of the things that it's requiring. That would be one of them. The other would be if you're a business founder or someone who is in the process of creating a business centered around software and you're not as familiar with the software process. I advise on how that works in terms of recruiting talent, getting the systems together, how things work. So, as we discussed, I've done hardware, infrastructure, actual software. So, knowing how all of those things work together and how to manipulate the parts that you might want to write yourself and have them integrate with things that you can buy. And at best, case scenario being turning something that you don't know the cost of into something that is essentially a monthly bill. Like, because it is tied to a subscription service and certain other things, you can get some of those costs into I pay $30 a month for this, I pay so and so a month for that, I pay this a month for that. And then I have to recruit talent who knows how to do the following things. And then the system that I created for my previous jobs, I was responsible for designing those. So we would take a customer and it's the same set of customers on the same system, but the configuration in the back end is what gets you one experience versus somebody else a different experience. Like for example, your branding is unique to you. So when you enter into the system, these are your colors, these are all the things that make it feel like it's your workplace, even though you're using our subscription as a system. Um, and some people, like your reports are very important to you as a business. They have your logos, they have all of your things, you're able, sometimes people are very particular about how they want things done and they're not going to use your system not because of how it does its actual functions but how the output is formatted, right? And that can be an impediment in a deal going forward because we do reports like this around here and you don't give me the ability to do that. So that's like one of the things will change. So in a consulting manner, using all of that for people who are trying to make software so that they make sure that they put in all of the components that business people need that they may not be as aware of.
Okay. Remember we had a conversation a little while ago, and it was about how relationships can drive business decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And we discussed how a certain company can have a relationship with another company, let's say Microsoft in this example. So a company can have a relationship with Microsoft, and for their business, it may be better for them to go with Google, but because Microsoft has a good relationship with maybe the owner of the company, they end up going with that Microsoft software. Can you kind of speak to that?
Okay. So for example, let's say that you have a company and you have a set of auditors. So someone does your taxes, right? The company who is doing your taxes is not also going to be the person who does your IT. So because of some of these relationships, you can't use the same person for both services. So you have this group doing one thing, you have another group doing something else. Let's say you have a partnership, and embedded in that partnership, the group is already using, let's say they're using AWS, right? So they've already kind of picked portions of your technology stack. And so all of a sudden, because you entered into this, now you have to manage that technology stack and the people who are able to handle that. Um, so there are business reasons that those relationships are created. And if you are a publicly traded company, right, and we now know, so again, I'm talking about things regarding a system, if you're in the medical industry or other, so particularly the medical industry, there's HIPAA, right? So you have to make sure that you are handling patient records correctly, right? So um, a set of people are going to come in and audit your systems, like from an IT standpoint. They're going to go through and look through your systems and make sure that everything is operating correctly. And you have to make sure that you're giving them access to everything that you need. Let's say that in conjunction with that, again, it could be a banking related system. So one group of people is doing like the IT audit, but somebody else is coming in and doing a financial audit of your systems. And those group of people may not be the same. And it's a business reason as to why they're not the same group of people. But in other cases, you're working with someone and someone on high has decided that the contract is going to insert company and we're going to be using their products. Not because we've done any research and we've determined that this is the best fit for our use case, but because they have a relationship with this group and that's the tech stack that we're going to use or that's the product that we're going to use. Um, Another example could be that, again, you're already within an existing relationship and they have a product in their suite of products, and it's going to be financially beneficial for us to use that because it's a part of our bundle, right? So we're going to start with trying to use that because it's included, right? And it may not be best of class. Like they might be great in the thing that you originally are getting from them, but let's say that they're not the best at um, large data sets that are NoSQL databases, right? And you would prefer to use another vendor, but you already have a contract with them, and that particular portion of the product is thrown in for free. So business people are telling you, use that, right? And you have to therefore make a good case if that is not going to be what you need. And sometimes, again, that relationship that you have with the people who are responsible for making that decision is also going to help you within your group, right? Because when I say, "Hey, William, this ain't it," right? And you know, when I come to you and I say that, I'm not saying it because I don't like Microsoft systems. It's just that it's not the best fit for what we're trying to do, right? And we have that relationship where you trust what I do and you trust my opinion, as opposed to somebody who I have to make a large outlay of resources to prove to them that we should use this product versus that product, right? They don't necessarily trust my opinion as much or the money outlay, right, that they think outweighs what I'm saying. So again, that's a relationship can help you get around something else, but sometimes a relationship can kind of get in your way.
Mhm. Also, I don't know if you've seen. I've made a few videos talking about an acquisition that's going on with Adobe and Figma. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Figma before, but it's one of the leading
Hmm.
platforms for designers and also for designers to work with developers by actually creating designs and then it actually creates and compiles code for them. Well, creates code for them. So with that, that relationship has led to this acquisition to where they have like uh, the biggest amount of money that they pulled for a specific acquisition, which is $20 billion in Adobe's full history, right? So with that, a lot of people were bringing up that, hey, why is it that they're going to spend $20 billion when their stock prices are going down? Do you think that because Adobe wants to, you know, edge the market or become a bigger company uh, due to the technology that Figma has, do you think that they're trying to become a bigger company because of the technologies, or do you think that because of a relationship they built with Figma that led to this acquisition?
So I'm not as aware of the particulars of that, but I can speak to it broadly.
Okay.
So I've seen instances of both, right? Where there's a good relationship between two individuals and they are absorbing that other person's company and it looks like the price is relatively high. based on that relationship and how they're negotiating. They're not negotiating um, as cutthroat as they might have in a different deal. But the other thing is that we're currently in a cycle where there are people coming at companies from all sides in terms of the context of what you're doing is getting bigger. And one of the ways that you might retain someone is by making sure that you have components that they're doing in your product, right? So if you were to go back to a much uh, longer period of time previous to this, but it was the browsers, right? Like before a browser was an add-on, and then people placed the browser within the operating system, right? And they fought about that for a while. But the point was that that becomes something that I expect to have. And so instead of me fighting with a company that already has those components within it, I should buy a company to make sure that my company has those components, right? So instead of partnering or saying that, hey, I work best with these 3 or 4 different companies, right? I look at my competitor and my competitor has things that I don't have, right? So instead of me engineering that in house, I'll just go buy it and then absorb it into my company. And in terms of like Adobe, obviously, is very good around working with people in that creative visual space. And then Figma allows that integration with the more UX design components, and the developers can work together and you can just send them those designs and they kind of integrate together. There are other systems that also do that. And so Adobe might look at that and say, hey, we're kind of losing the stranglehold on the part that we do. And we want to make sure that we're the preferred choice because Adobe and Figma work together and everybody's using Figma. I'll 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 mention one thing. For social media, right? I've been using Adobe Photoshop and there used to be a thing called Corel Draw, I think, and like all these packages for a long time. So I can open up Adobe and do all kinds of things, right? But then you have Canva, and Canva is designed for someone who's trying to do X, right? They don't have to have the same learning curve. It might not do as many things as you can do with Adobe Photoshop, but it does this thing well, and you can know less about the technical aspects to get your product out. So that's what I mean by like they're getting attacked kind of like on all sides of all of a sudden a person who not have might have been your customer and it might have required them to learn a lot. They don't really have to learn a whole lot in Canva in order to get up to speed. So it might be narrowing the field of people. So you want to make sure that you keep those people by saying, hey, if you're just used to doing this, let's absorb a company that gives you the capabilities to not have to learn the harder thing. But for those who are using the harder thing, let's figure out how we keep them.
Okay. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this before either. Is some companies have acquired other companies for specific developers because
Oh,
the
yes.
developer was just so good. Have you've heard of that before?
Oh yeah, there are. So companies have been acquired for their development team. They've been acquired for their business contacts. They've been acquired specifically for a piece of technology. So, um, so let's go to customers. Oh no, and let me add another one. Some companies have been acquired just to kill it off.
Yeah.
Right? Like we have no intentions of integrating that into our systems. We don't need your developers. We don't need anything. We just need you to stop doing that. Uh, so it's always of interest, right? And that's why founders and people kind of have to look at it and figure out what those deals are like, because sometimes you have and you are propositioned in one way, but the purpose is something completely different. Like you're in this space, you're competing with the product that they have in development, and so they need you to get out of the way, right? So they buy you and um, put all those people to work on this other thing, which is what they're going to build. Um, the other one, again, could be employees, right? So you have some really good talent and you're using them to do something that's very close to the things that we need them to do. So we're going to, instead of going through and trying to recruit everybody who's over there, that's a well-oiled machine that knows how to get a product out. We buy the whole company and then put you on another project. Um, and and we've got the entire team. We don't have to worry about cherry picking specific employees. um, and then obviously in those instances, they make sure with the deals and things that they construct that they do get the people. Like we don't buy the company and then everybody's allowed to quit. That was why we bought the company. We want the people, right? Or we want the key people who we need. Or it's a piece of technology, right? Like you're using it to do one thing, but we have this lovely use case that we're did you watch the show Silicon Valley?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so they have a storyline in essence to make it plain, like, where they're using this piece of technology, and a person is coming in and he's trying to acquire the company, and they're using it for, I believe it's like for something related to music, but he has a much more lucrative idea, but he wants to buy the company, right? For the episodes that I saw, because he wants to take that piece and apply it to something else, right? So you started this company and um, you're using it to do one, like for example, Napster, right? Like people use Napster in order to um, create these on ad hoc networks in order to stream music, but it was ultimately bought with the idea of that. How do you create on ad hoc networks on the fly? That was what we really want out of this piece of technology. We don't want to steal music with it.
Mhm. Yes, I did not know that. I mean, I had to check out Silicon Valley then. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so there's something that you brought up earlier in this discussion, and it was about how uh, school or college doesn't actually prepare a lot of the students in order to get into these jobs. Do you want to speak to that before I go on to the next question? I know you brought it up earlier on before we started talking about business, but
So it depends, really.
okay.
So based on the size of the shop and how segmented it is, right, and what your degree is in, you may have not covered all of the components that you're going to be asked to do. Like, so using software as a base, perhaps you've done a lot of web development and you've done some front end, but you get in a company and I need you to do some back end development. I immediately bring you in your collegiate environment, you've been learning C++, plus plus, you might have done a little JavaScript, and now I need you to become a Java developer, right? So we have to build upon what you already have, and then you've never done anything with NoSQL databases, right? So now we have to broaden what you understand in terms of how that works. And ultimately, it's software, or the software industry, or the technology industry as a whole. They're going to invent something tomorrow that none of us know how to do, but is going to be vital to our job. So everybody has to become comfortable learning new things. Um, and then part of that also becomes a disposition of the person. And sometimes this is not necessarily how they saw their career going, because they interviewed for the job and it was presented as one thing, and then in all good faith, this was what it was. But it has some other components that you need. And from a small company point of view, again, you get asked to wear a lot of hats. So you may not be able to simply design the front end, right? Like you're not just going to be a UX designer, you're going to actually develop it. You're going to approach a full stack developer. Like I can't expect you to do all of the things on day one, but you're going to most likely end up touching several parts of the system. And there's always going to be one part, even if you did cover it in your undergrad or your graduate school, you didn't go as in depth as you're going to need to do in order to do it on a daily basis.
Okay. And when it comes to people who are graduating from college, I always bring up that networking is a vital piece to the pretty much the purpose of going to college. Now, do you agree with that statement, or about how networking
So
is vital for college graduates?
I would say that I would that you should get the fundamentals from college, right? Part of those fundamentals should be how to work together as a team, which is usually what people can't stand. I think almost everybody has a group project that went awry, right? Um, so having to develop how you work as a team, how you contribute to something that's going to require more than one person to lay eyes on it. How you negotiate different personalities, different components in terms of what's necessary. Again, we talked about having to negotiate relationships that extend beyond your own company and who you work with, um, both internally and externally. So I would definitely say that relationships are important. I would say for building your career, if you were in a collegiate program or a boot camp or anything else, that as you're looking for a job, as everyone who you went to school with finds their self in other positions or is looking, that's a network to help you find your next position, as well as to keep you abreast of what's going on out in the workforce. If you have a friend that works over here, they're more likely to know about a job opening, right, internally before it hits the job board, right? And they can talk to you about it and let you know. They're also recommendations. So a lot of companies would prefer to hire based on recommendations of their employees because if I recommend you and you come to work here, I am essentially lending my reputation to you. And because of that, you reflect me. So I can't go around recommending people who aren't going to look well, like, hey, we should stop listening to Mark because the last two or three people that you sent me didn't work out, right? But also, I have access if that is my background and those are the circles that I run into that like, hey, you go get a recruiter and the recruiter is looking for where are the engineers, where are the people who do X. Well, I spend time with those people, right? I know the projects you're working on. I went to school with you. I know how well you work. I talk to you on the weekends. We get drinks. I know what your work effort uh, ethic is like, and I also know like, hey, you're not really looking, but you can be lured over to us because of whatever it is or is not happening at your job right now.
Mhm. That's a great point. And of course, I'm not, downplaying, the actual fact that you need to have the skills to get the job. But I also heard that more than likely you would get a job through a network or a relationship way faster than you would if you just apply for the job cold. I heard that a
Hmm.
lot of these jobs are open like from backdoor applications as opposed to just going through their website, actually applying.
The way that some companies do it is a very formal process, right? The job has to be available. So again, we talked about bureaucracy, or at least that's what I was alluding to earlier, where I give someone something and it takes a month or more in order for it to filter its way through the system. I mean, a job opening can be the same thing. Like there's a formal process that this company has in order to start the hiring process. But we know that so and so got fired already, or we know that so and so is leaving already. So I can help begin that process now instead of the month that it is going to take in order for the job posting to be available, right? Sometimes, again, talking about political, sometimes they leave jobs open because we really don't want that fifth person on our team, but we're required to have them. So they're interviewing with no intent on fulfilling that role because we want to use that money on the budget for something else, right? So we're intentionally trying not to find someone so we can move that money over here. The other one would be that like there's this long drawn out process, but if I already know somebody who's perfect for this, like we're going around, we're looking for somebody who's a C sharp ASP.NET person who has worked on this, that, or the other, and I know just the right set of people, right? And I can go talk to them. So we can be laying the groundwork to bring this person in. And again, the job has yet to hit um, the job board. And then sometimes if we're talking about like a management position or anything else that involves more, let's call them soft skills, right? It's going to be more about those relationships and their belief in your ability to do X, Y, and Z and to lead a team and all those other good things. So they're going to be checking about who you know and who knows you and those type of things. And it's going to be less about a coding test to begin with. So you can begin that process earlier, right? By knowing what's going on. And instead of us going through this whole thing, it's like, hey, let's give William an offer, right? Like we don't even do that other stuff, you know. Uh, we just, tell the recruiter if that's how we have to do it, go see what he wants. And then I've already had a talk with you, and we've already talked about those things, and it's a much easier lift. Because I really need somebody on my team right now to be able to take over this project. And so, as the person who's responsible for that, I've already done my due diligence and kind of looking for the people that I want.
Mhm. Okay. Also, you kind of alluded to something as well about the company's perceived value of a specific talent or candidate. Can you kind of speak to that as well, like on and how can you improve your value, your perceived value to companies?
So, the idea that you have your skills and your talents and then you want to display them to your potential employer. So you want to have a portfolio, you want to have work that you've done that somebody can view, you want to be conversant in explaining the things you've done. All of that is important regardless of where you are in your career. And you also want to get a good feel for what they value over there in terms of what are the components that they're looking for in this role that might not be embedded in the roles and responsibilities that are on that piece of paper. So again, it behooves you to find people who work there to find out what the culture is like, um, what are the real day to day to see whether or not you really are a quote unquote cultural fit, whether or not this is really somewhere you want to work, um, how they, again, what the interpersonal connections are. You don't want to step into a landmine. Is there a reason that this job is vacant that you don't want a part of? Um, and that would help you how you display your value because you would understand what's valuable to them, right? Like, again, a lot of times there are 12 things on that roles and responsibility, and even the people who work here only know four of them, and it's not all the same four. So you may be honing in on something that's not really what they're looking for, although it's on that sheet of paper. So if you have some relationships, you could lean into like, well, here's what a real candidate looks like over here. Um, and also, again, having talent in the building can help you kind of negotiate what that interview process looks like to know, like, maybe they favor outspoken individuals, and that's you. So make sure that you display that in terms of how you come across and your eagerness to solve a problem or that type of thing. I mean, it can differ, but you don't want to walk into anything blind. And I'll say, in terms of like trying to get hired, submitting your resume to the thing that everybody else can submit their resume to is like the least likely thing that's going to get you the job, right? If it's a link on LinkedIn, like anybody can send in their resume, and then on the other side, you can get deleted or put into another pile for the most arbitrary of reasons, which doesn't necessarily happen if there's somebody speaking to you as a potential candidate because they know of you and know your resume and kind of can walk you through a process, right? Um, as well as like you were saying, help you negotiate how you present yourself, not misrepresenting yourself, but presenting the attributes that they're going to be most interested in a viable candidate.
Okay. Mark, I wanted to ask you, do you have anything that you wanted to promote, or anything that you're working on, or anything like that? Any social media links that you want me to highlight?
So you can find me at Clever Anchor on all platforms. The one that I am most active on is LinkedIn, and that's going to be Mark Lawson Clever Anchor. So just type those keywords in, and you'll find me, and you'll be able to connect with me on LinkedIn, view my content, get involved in any conversations, reach out to me for anything that any of your listeners need or any advice that they're looking for in terms of digital transformation. Maybe they want my services. Maybe they just want to talk about hiring and other things in the Black tech sphere. So definitely can reach out to me there. You can reach Text of Color at Text of Color on all platforms or textofcolor.org. That's our website. So www.textofcolor.org. Um, we also got a TikTok now, so we're trying to build that up. Right now, we have available on Apple Music and a couple of other platforms. There are our own podcasts out available now. Also, we have a YouTube channel, so type in Technologists of Color and you'll see some interviews that we've had recently with some of our sponsors. So
Like
definitely check us
BlackRock.
out on all those. Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely check us out. And of course, when you connect with us, we're on Meetup as well. So you can connect and follow us there. We put all our information up on Eventbrite. We try and be as available as possible. If you're in the Atlanta area on one of the nights that we are hosting an event, then be sure to come out. But other than that, follow us on all of our social media, and there might be the opportunity for some virtual things. Right now, this is Wednesday, October 5th. We are giving away some tickets. So I'm not really sure when this is going to come out, but we are giving away tickets to a conference. So the conference is coming up. You may miss that one, uh, but that's the kind of thing that we do often. So again, link with us. And one of the things that we're really most interested in is that you we are trying to serve Black people in the technology space so that you represent that identity and that you are actually going to attend the conference and enjoy it, right? So if that's the case, we're looking for people in the Atlanta area. If the conference is in the Atlanta area, but we have conferences, in the tech space that are all over the country, and we often have tickets to them, and we're looking for someone who's willing to go and who has the means to go. So again, check us out there for conferences and other things. So
So,
yeah.
Mark, I think this went well. I really appreciate your expertise and your opinion on all
Mm.
of this. If you don't mind, can you stay in the back for me, and then I'll go ahead and close out.
Okay. And thank you.
All right, thank you as well, Mark. All right, everybody. So that was another great discussion, another great interview that we had over here on the Black Man in Tech channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will see you all on the next video. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And also hit that bell notification icon if you want to be notified whenever I make new videos on YouTube. All right, guys. So you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I really do appreciate it.